you one final question. Where are you going after the game tonight?
Tonight I'm going to the Berwyn Summerfest.
Okay. Ron, one more final question before you go into your hitters meeting. Where are you going after the game tonight?
I'm going to Berwyn Summer Fair.
All right.
Come out and see us.
Fantastic. Let me ask you a final question here. Where are you going after the game tonight?
Berwyn Summer Fair.
All right. You're the fifth one.
Thank you. You still feeling all right out there? I hear you say, woo! We want to thank you for putting us in the driver's seat today. We hope you had a good ride, and this is the vehicle that got us here today.
Welcome to our show. It's called
Sports,
Entertainment, and
People and Places.
And we are
Rich Nye
Jim Capsa
and Bobby Considine.
So there you have it, folks. We're going to be talking about all of these categories on today's show. And I think the first thing we're going to do, because Rich and Bob, who are very good friends of mine and have been for many years, don't like to talk about themselves very much, but I'm going to lead them into it anyway. Rich Nye, of course, was a Major League Baseball pitcher for 5 years, and he spent most of his time with the Chicago Cubs. He was a rookie in 1967, and he won 13 games that year to set a Cubs rookie record for pitchers, which was later tied by Kerry Wood. And you have a couple of other nice distinctions. You have been a veterinarian for just about, I won't say how many years, most of your adult life. So tell us a little bit about that. Plus, you've got some things that you've done in your woodworking shop, which I find really interesting.
Well, thank you, Jim. Yes, I've been a veterinarian for 45 years now. I went to the University of Illinois in 1976. And when I graduated, I took a job with a practice up in Niles that had a special interest in birds at the time. And I was fascinated by this. And as my career has progressed, I have actually been doing exotic pets only for the last 30 years. And those exotic pets are pet birds, reptiles, small mammals like guinea pigs and ferrets and rabbits, lots of rabbits. So that's what I've been doing for 45 years. But, you know, it comes a point in your life that says, well, when I retire, what am I going to do? I'm going to stop working my 60 to 80 hours a week, and I don't want to just sit in front of the TV and play with the remote control. So I got introduced to wood turning. I had some exposure when I was in high school and had exposure again about 15 years ago. So I've been turning wood. That means I use a lathe and we embellish the pieces we make. Lots of practical things like salad bowls and platters and plates. But I got into the wood art part, and so I've started making boxes and things that don't have any particular use at all, but they're pretty to look at.
I like them. We're going to see a few in a couple of minutes, but I want to get Bob Considine involved here because, as I hinted to the viewers out there in the audience, you were a fireman for most of your adult life.
That's correct.
In addition to that, you have quite a athletic background, let's put it that way, through high school and college, but you never turned pro as far as I know. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, I started off like Rich, playing college baseball and football, actually. Ended up getting offered a contract with the Chicago White Sox and finished up at college instead and went on the fire department, had a great 30-plus year career.
And now you're retired.
Now I'm retired and doing other things of interest to mine.
Well, what about you have a javelin record and some cross-country type stuff.
Well, it was interesting when I was at college. We had activity classes, and the track coach said, come on out and try the javelin. I said, well, I was there on a baseball scholarship, so I said, well, yeah, I'll try it. I said, but what you want to do, you want to move those people back a little bit. Well, he laughed, and so I threw the javelin and came a couple feet short of a collegiate record.
Really?
And he said, well, how about a track scholarship? And I said, well, I just don't have time for that right now in our busy life with baseball. Yeah. And then later on, when I got on the fire department, we have a worldwide competition with police and firefighters. So I said, well, I'm going to go to San Diego, and I'm going to do the triathlon. I did that, and I finished about in the middle of the pack with that. Not being a baseball player, swimming and biking and running wasn't exactly my favorite thing. Yeah. So I went out and threw the javelin, practiced with an old javelin that we had from the college, and went out and I was very lucky to take a bronze medal in the javelin in the police and fire games, which was kind of fun. It was great meeting people from Australia, and the javelin thrower that won the gold medal was from Canada.
How about that?
And he was just fantastic.
Yeah. And Bob hasn't mentioned one other thing that he's been involved in recently, and that is quote unquote acting or taking part in film and television productions. I know you've been involved at CineSpace in Chicago on the 3 major shows that are being videotaped there. Tell us a little bit about that before we go into your photos.
Oh, sure. CineSpace is a very interesting area here in Chicago. They brought Hollywood to our Chicago area. Beautiful, beautiful studios that have, Chicago Fire has a fire station actually inside with a bar. The show Empire was filmed there with a beautiful hall and soundstage, and Chicago Med and Chicago PD are also filmed there.
You took part in a lot of those shows.
I did. I was very fortunate to get a part on Chicago PD for the opening scene, actually as a fire chief.
Really?
So I don't know how much acting it really was, but they gave me a role on Chicago Fire, and then you get to work the 3 shows.
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
And of course, none of us mentioned the fact that all 3 of us, I don't know if we actually met in senior baseball, but I remember that we all played senior baseball. I played till I was 65 years old. We're not talking about softball fans. We're talking about hardball. And I could speak for Rich and for Bob and myself. Going to the Senior Baseball World Series in Phoenix, Arizona, Phoenix and Tucson and other surrounding suburbs, each year at the end of October, the beginning of November, where over 300 senior baseball teams come and play baseball in baseball heaven on all the major league spring training sites. And Rich, I have one play in mind that's not going to mean anything to the folks out there, but it means a lot to me. You were pitching in one of our games, and somebody hit a ground ball up the middle. I was playing second base. I dove and caught that ball, and I got a standing ovation. Nobody could believe that I caught that ball and threw the runner out at first. Do you remember that? No, he's going to say no.
I do remember that only one play you caught that ball.
Yeah, I caught a few more.
And by the way,
I know.
you were a very good ball player in your own right, and he managed and coached and played with a few championship teams also. So
yeah. On today's program, we have a very special event. We visited the Cernan Earth and Space Center on the campus of Triton College in River Grove, Illinois, for the 50th anniversary of NASA's last mission to the moon in December 1972, Apollo 17. Hello, we're at the Cernan Earth and Space Center on the campus of Triton College in River Grove, Illinois. And we're going to be talking about the man that the center was named after and the author of this book, The Last Man on the Moon, by Captain Eugene A. Cernan, member of the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame, and actually was the last man to set foot on the moon. And we're recording this on December 19th, 2022, exactly to the date when they splashed down and returned from their mission to the moon. They actually splashed down on December 19th, 1972. And this is Captain Cernan's spacesuit. It's not the one that he went to the moon on Apollo 17 in. He went to the moon twice. He's one of only 3 people on the face of the Earth that have gone to the moon 2 times. But they didn't land the first time. That was Apollo 10. And this is Captain Cernan's spacesuit from Apollo 10. And at that time, they just circled the moon a few times, like a little joyride, like a rehearsal, you might say, for the big thing, when they actually landed on the moon and stayed there around the moon for 13 days in 1972, December. They spent, actually Captain Cernan and his associate, Jack Schmidt, a geologist, lived on the moon for 3 days, December 11th, 12th, and 13th, 1972. And here we are 50 years later talking about it. And we have an expert to talk with us, and that person is Chris McCall. Chris, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And Chris is the director of the Cernan Earth and Space Center, and she knows more than anybody else at the Triton College about the Earth and Space Center, right?
Yes, I believe so.
And we're not bragging about that either, because she knows her business. As a matter of fact, before we started this interview, she gave me a not a rehearsal, but a preview of one of her special shows in the Planetarium at the Cernan Earth and Space Center. Tell the folks out there about the show that you just showed me a little revival of.
So in the planetarium, round room, dome ceiling, a lot of people think all we do is talk about what's up in the current night sky. We'd like to do that, and the public likes that, but with digital technology now, we can do astronomy and space exploration, but then that lets us talk about all of the sciences: biology, chemistry, physics, geology, history, culture, art, music, and so much more. So shows can be on a whole variety of different topics. And so it could be Forward to the Moon, or it could be Dinosaurs at Dusk. It could be Stars, Powerhouses of the Universe, or it could be a historic program called World to War that actually goes back and takes us back to World War II. So lots of different kinds of programs available in the planetarium. So what you saw was a teaser of a lot of different material.
That it was, because I'm going to have to come back for the full 1-hour show. And the tickets are available to individuals and groups, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So a lot of people think all we do is serve the college campus. And yes, we do support a lot of different college courses, not just astronomy, but engineering and robotics, early childhood education, English as a second language, all sorts of things. We also do a lot of visiting school groups, everything from pre-kindergarten to other colleges and everything in between. And we're open to the public. So what I like to tell people is there are 2 planetariums in Chicago. We have free parking.
That's fantastic.
Laughs, but it's true.
I think now, I don't know what the parking fee is at the Adler Planetarium, but I know for Bears games they're charging $50.
Yes, yes. I think even on a regular day it's about $13. And so, anyway.
Well, coming to Triton College is quite a pleasure. I live in a western suburb, and I'm not going to ask you where you live, but I'm assuming it's in a suburb, right?
Yes, I live nearby, yes.
Okay. And you don't have to, if you come to the planetarium here at Cernan Earth and Space Center, it's a beautiful campus, and the parking is great, and you're less than a football field away from the front door. Tickets, or you want to say anything about the prices?
Very reasonably priced for a regular planetarium show. They're $4 and $8 depending on your age. And we also still do light shows, bright lights, loud music, really entertaining as opposed to educational, and those are $5 and $10.
And what are the hours, days and hours again?
So our planetarium schedule is pretty variable. The best way to get the current schedule is to go to the website. There's a Google Calendar there. You can see our schedule for the next couple of months. Right now, we do Wednesday afternoons and Saturday nights for the general public. But for instance, on days when school is out and during the summer, we run a much more expanded schedule.
What are we standing in front of here?
So what we're looking at here are, some are artifacts, some are flown, some are not flown. For instance, there's a couple of objects from a lunar module. Now, the lunar modules didn't come back to the Earth, so these are from, I'll call them redundancy, or, additional units of something that was manufactured. So we have components from the lunar module that were involved in navigation. We also have some flown objects from Apollo 17, his gloves that he wore inside the spacecraft, the clothes that he wore inside the spacecraft. So some flown objects as well. We're very pleased to be able to try to interpret that, because we now have a whole generation who, as you said earlier, this occurred 50 years ago. It's like ancient history. And he was the last person to leave a footprint on the moon. And Captain Cernan was very disappointed that he expected to live long enough to see someone else make new footprints on the moon, and he didn't get that opportunity. So hopefully sooner rather than later. But getting to the moon is a real challenge, and so we're working on that.
Well, I'll tell you, I was fortunate enough to meet Captain Cernan, and back on November 14th of 2012, he was appearing at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, and he was nice enough to come to our grand opening of the Czech American Community Center in Berwyn. I picked him up at his hotel downtown, brought him out to Berwyn, Illinois, and actually he was very familiar with Berwyn, Illinois, because he grew up in Maywood and Broadview. He was born at St. Anthony's Hospital in Chicago, which happens to be where I was born, and he had a lot of relatives in the Berwyn-Cicero area, so he made a presentation that day, and we had a packed house. They were walking out, lined up out the door trying to get in to see Captain Cernan. But I'll tell you, one of the things that I remember that he told the crowd that day was that he was the first driver on the moon of the lunar rover, and he said that he had the misfortune of hitting a rock, believe it or not, and cracking a fender on the lunar rover. And guess what? He fixed that lunar rover fender with 2 maps and some duct tape. True story. And that's the kind of guy he was, just a regular guy.
Yes, absolutely. Very personable, talked to everybody. In fact, sometimes they had to drag him on to the next activity because he was so personable.
Well, before we talk anymore with Chris, I have to tell you that the second half of our show, you're going to see the entire presentation that Captain Cernan made in Berwyn on November 14th, 2012 at the grand opening of the Czech American Community Center. And I have to tell you that his speech on November 14th, 2012 was the most inspirational speech I had heard in a long, long time, many, many years. And when you see the speech in the second half of our show, you're going to feel the same way. It's going to move you. And all I can say is, let's go to the next display case here and tell us what you have over here. Okay,
I'm looking
Chris?
forward to hearing that talk.
Okay. And this is Eugene Cernan's book. It was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for probably 6 or 8 months back when it first came out. But it's The Last Man on the Moon. And we were talking about leaving things on the moon and Captain Cernan fixing the lunar rover. He also left his daughter's initials in the dust on the moon, and only he and a few select people know exactly where they are. But I remember him saying to me that someday another person's going to go up there and maybe they'll find those initials. But right now, what you see in back of me is something that Chris is going to explain to you, and it's something you can see online.
So there's this really cool website called ApolloInRealTime.com. all one word, apolloinrealtime.com. They have recreated the entire mission from before launch to splashdown and recovery in real time. All of the audio, all of the transcripts, the photographs, the video, and let you know who's in the command module, are they sleeping on the lunar surface, or are they getting ready to go EVA? And we actually were playing this during the last couple of weeks in real time, in sync with the events that occurred in 1972. In fact, Splashdown and Recovery occurred just before you got here. It's an awesome program. You can also follow Apollo 11 and Apollo 13.
Now we have something else to show you, and Chris is really good at this part, because in this display case are models of various things that have to do with Captain Cernan's career and the Apollo missions.
Well, what we wanted to highlight was how Apollo really got into popular culture. And so some examples include a box that at one time contained moon cheese, a promotional product out of Wisconsin, of course. So moon cheese, moon soup from a particular restaurant in Pennsylvania that the astronauts supposedly enjoyed, and so some soup was prepared. They sold it in the restaurant. I have 2 cans. I'm not sure what it would taste like 50 years later.
You're going to save them for posterity.
To save them for posterity. Speaking of the models, so what we actually have are the 2 models that we have here are Apollo Lego kits. So one is the Apollo Saturn V, which is lying horizontally there in its different pieces. And the people at LEGO like to have fun, and so the model is actually composed of 1,969 pieces. 1969, of course. The other model is a lunar module, and you could, if you wanted to, imagine that it was the lunar module Challenger that landed on the surface in Apollo 17. What we have found is that the space kits from LEGO are some of the most popular, and they don't manufacture them infinitely. So when they're gone, they're gone. But these are belong to some local collectors. So also in the case, just for fun, is a little moon globe. The thing that makes the moon globe special is that the globe was released before the additional Apollo missions were canceled. So we were supposed to go all the way to Apollo 20. We got to Apollo 17, but the Apollo 18 and 19 landing sites are actually on the globe. I really like the artistry of the crescent moon with the Apollo command and service module orbiting around it. It's actually a liqueur decanter, or a bottle, if you will. So just, fun things. The glass here that with the rocket nozzle is the bottom. There's actually a fill to the fuel line on the glass.
Are these things all available in the shop here?
No, unfortunately, they're not. They tend to be found at antique stores, thrift shops, things like that. The astronaut cow from Cows on Parade that some people might remember from a very long time ago. So these are just some examples. I had way more that I wanted to put in the case, but they stopped me. So.
Well, you mentioned the landing site. I read in this book, The Last Man on the Moon, that they were actually able to land within 200 feet on the moon of where they were supposed to land. From a shot from the Earth to go up to the moon and land 200 feet away from the exact spot.
Yes, that is absolute. While Apollo 11, when they got ready to land, they actually discovered that there was a boulder field where they were intending to land, and they had to go a little bit further. Apollo 12 landed maybe not as precisely as Apollo 17, but one of the goals of Apollo 12 was to land close enough so that they could actually walk over to Surveyor 3, which was a robotic lander that had landed on the moon 2 years previous. And so they got this down to a science in terms of all of the orbital dynamics and the celestial mechanics and engine burns and all of that to get you where you needed to be.
You hear people say the word amazing all the time, but the entire mission was truly, truly amazing. And once again, Captain Cernan, he wanted to live long enough to see another man land on the moon, and he wasn't able to do that. He was born in 1934, passed away in January of 2017. And so he was 82 years old when he passed away, but he did a lot of living in his 82 years.
Absolutely, yes, he did.
A lot of it was in central Wisconsin, by the way. His grandparents owned a farm up there, and he spent a lot of time.
Yes, I heard about that. Yes, I heard about that.
Okay, well, now we're going to please our audience in the out there in TV land, and we're going to play that presentation by Captain Cernan at the Czech American Community Center in Berwyn, Illinois. And this is the grand opening when Eugene A. Cernan was our honored guest. We're going to introduce Captain Cernan right now, but I want to show everybody here the plaque that's going up. This will go, when we open our building, this will go in the conference center, and it's going to have a place of honor right here too. It's the Cernan Conference Center. And it shows on here, it says, I'll read it to you. Dedicated in honor of Captain Eugene A. Cernan, U.S. astronaut, Commander, Apollo 17, December 1972, the last man on the moon. He's a son of a Czech mother and a Slovak father. The 1963 NASA group. His missions were Gemini 9A in June 1966, Apollo 10 in May 1969, and Apollo 17 in December 1972. And we have one small plaque to go. I'd like to read this too. This is going to Captain Cernan. It says Chicagoland Czech American Community Center Award of Highest Honor, presented to Captain Eugene A. Cernan, U.S. astronaut, in recognition of exemplary lifetime service to country and community. Thank you. And here he is. Thank you.
I want to thank you all for coming. Believe it or not, I'm really overwhelmed to see all you folks here. I know you had something better to do than to come and see me, but I will. And I know you got a million questions. Unfortunately, we probably won't be able to answer them all here today. But I want you to know I am very proud of my Czech and my Slovak heritage. I was born an American. I'll always be an American, but my culture, of my family culture, goes back to both the Czech Republic and to Slovakia, and it's something I want you to know I'm extremely proud of. I've been back to Czech Republic on many occasions, and Slovakia. The first time was before the Velvet Revolution back in, I think, of probably 1974 75. And that was a very, very interesting trip for me because everyone in Prague, I remember specifically, knew who I was, but they could not acknowledge me at all. The folks in control of the country at that time wanted me to go back and visit with some of my family, and then when I got there, they wanted me to go to a big communist rally at that time, and I said, "I'm sorry, I'm here to see my family," and they lived back there at that time almost as I remember growing up. I lived in Bellwood, Maywood, Broadview. Just like my mom, my aunts, my uncles, all lived as I grew up, the way I remember it. And this is a very familiar place. It's changed. But on my Bohemian side, all my mother's brothers and sisters all lived in Berwyn and Cicero and eventually Brookfield and Riverside. And my dad only had one brother, and he lived in southern Illinois. So I was really attached and knew my mother's Bohemian family more than I did my dad's. My dad's grandparents had a farm up in north central Wisconsin where I spent a great deal of my time. And of course they lived up there like they lived in the old country because my maternal grandparents and paternal grandparents, both sides, came over to Chicago around the turn of the century. So I'm second generation. Mom and Dad were both born here in Chicago, and I was born at St. Anthony Hospital, right?
My neighborhood.
And, well, I don't know exactly where it is, but that's where I was born. I went to Purdue. I graduated proviso. I went to Purdue. My dream as a kid, and I try and instill some of the same dreams I had in kids of today, to inspire them to do things they didn't think they could do. And I just wanted to fly airplanes off aircraft carriers. I grew up as a kid during World War II, and those anonymous heroes of their time, I watched them make airplanes do the impossible, the things they weren't supposed to do, and I said, I want to do that. And there was no space program at that time. I know some of the younger folks in the audience find that hard to believe, but Buck Rogers was about as close as we got to space. Graduated from Purdue in '56, went to Pensacola Navy flight training, out to the Western Pacific, flew off aircraft carriers. My dream come true, didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And not too much later, I got a call asking me if I wanted to volunteer for the space program, for the Apollo program. And, not only yes, but heck yes. And I had no idea where that would lead, because then a big selection process took place. And there were some couple thousand people in the process at that time, and I was selected in 1963 to be one of 14. The group just before us included Jim Lovell, Apollo 13, Neil Armstrong, Tom Stafford, Frank Borman, some of those guys, and we were 1 year after them. And even at that point in time, no one ever guaranteed you get a chance to fly in space. There were no rules in terms of what might come of the space program or whatever. And I think even at that point in my life, if someone would have said I'd have a chance to walk in space, go to the moon twice, and call the moon my home for 3 days of my life, they probably would have put me in a straitjacket. I really believe it. And let me just answer one other question that I get asked a lot. What's the thing you remember most about having gone to the moon? And it's to look back at the Earth. I cannot tell you how overpowering it is to look back at the beauty and the overwhelming impact that the Earth itself has on you. Because as you head out to the moon, in Earth orbit you don't see the Earth. You see it just slightly curved horizon. You head on out to the moon at 25,000 miles an hour, and all of a sudden the Earth, the horizon closes in around upon itself, and you see something very strange and yet very familiar, because all of a sudden you realize out your window is being filled up with that spacecraft with the entirety of the Earth. And you can look from the turquoise blues of the Bahamas and the Caribbean across the east coast of the United States, the windswept plains, the mountains on the Rocky Mountains, into the deep dark blues of the Pacific, and you don't even have to turn your head or move your eyeballs. And the Earth grows smaller and smaller and smaller very quickly when you're heading out to the moon, until the point comes, and some of you may have seen Apollo 13, when you can literally cover the Earth up with something smaller than the palm of your hand, literally with the thumb. You can cover up your identity, what I call the identity with reality, with nothing bigger than the thumb on your hand. And something else happens. Something else is strange. Because as you head on out, North America and South America sort of disappear around the corner, and then comes up Asia and Europe, and then the entire continent of Africa comes completely into view. You are looking at the other side of the world. You're no longer going around it like in Earth orbit. You fly around the Earth. Excuse me. It's those meatballs, those liver balls. You fly around the Earth every 90 minutes. You fly over a river, a coastline, cross the ocean in 15 minutes. But you're still part of the Earth. You're still only 150, 200 miles away. You might even get a glimpse of your own hometown if you're lucky. But when you head out to the moon, as I said, things do become different. And as you look back and watch that Earth rotate on an axis you can't see that must be there, and it moves with logic and with purpose beyond your conception. The Earth is surrounded by the blackest black. You're in daylight. This is a paradox on Earth. You're in daylight. You're looking at the sun shine on the Earth, and yet and everywhere else, and yet surrounding the Earth is a three-dimensional blackness. I didn't say it was dark. I said blackness. And I don't know, I can't show it to you, and I don't know what to really call it, but my recollection is that it's the infinity of space, the infinity of time, the endlessness of everything. And I guess people call that infinity, but it's just overwhelming. And it's a three-dimensional blackness. You can look that far alongside the Earth, and you can literally focus on that endlessness. And I can tell you it exists. I can't show it to you, but it's just because I saw it with my own eyes. And I had that experience on Apollo 10 when I went to the moon. And I came home after that, and I kept. It was just too beautiful to have happened by accident. There must be somebody bigger than you, some creator of this universe. I don't mean that to be a religious statement. You know, I'm Catholic. Most of us here probably are. We grew up in that culture. But above all religions, I think, and I accept anyone's way to worship their God, but is it truly, in my mind, a creator? And when I went back on Apollo 17, I challenged that thought. Only this time I had a chance to go all the way down to the moon. 10 we didn't land. And I was on the moon for 3 days. I came to the same conclusion that there must be something we don't understand, somebody bigger than the rest of us, a creator of this universe, a God, someone I choose to call God. And my way of getting there is through Jesus Christ. And I came home with the conclusion, after being on the moon, not only reinforcing my thoughts about the existence of a God, but the fact that I had been one of the few people in the history of mankind to have the opportunity to literally sit on God's front porch, looking back home at a small part of His creation, which includes this place we call home, this planet Earth. And I don't mind sharing those thoughts, because that's a feeling, that's a memory that will live in my mind until the day I'm no longer on this planet, and maybe thereafter, I'm not sure. Now, thank you. I don't know what your timing is.
Well, we have about 20 minutes, and we can. I'm sure Captain Cernan will be happy to answer a couple of questions. He has a book, I think. I don't know if I mentioned that, The Last Man on the Moon. It was on the New York Times bestseller list. It's excellent. It's one of my favorite books now. And believe it or not, he left some initials on the moon in the dust. And I asked him about that. And then we'll ask a couple of questions, take a couple of questions from the audience. But what was your answer to the initials in the dust?
Well, that was my daughter, who was 3, 6, and 9 on my 3 respective flights. 9 on Apollo 17, and her name is Teresa Dawn Cernan. And I say somewhere up there, I know where they are, but someday someone will go up there, I expect, and where we lived for a while, and see the initials scribbled in the sand, Teresa Dawn Cernter, TDC. Now you want to hear something funny about that? There is a television program. I watch sports and news, but there's a television program many of you probably know. Is it called Modern Family or something? About 6 or 8 months ago, I got all these emails, and I didn't know what they were about. I'd never heard of Modern Family. It turns out, apparently on Modern Family, maybe somebody saw it, there was a father who was trying to impress his young daughter. And everywhere he went, he took her to the zoo was closed. He took her to get a malted milk and the machine broke. Took her to get a hamburger and the waitress was a flippin'. And everything he did, he wanted to develop, you know, a father's communication with his 12-year-old daughter or something. And I watched this on YouTube afterwards. And he said, I just want to be like Gene Cernan. And his daughter said, who in the heck is Gene Cernan? Okay. And he says, he's the last man who walked on the moon. Big deal, right? And then she said, what did he do? He's the last man to walk on the moon. And he put his daughter's initials in a lunar surface. Apparently that still didn't impress his daughter. He says, and every father hates Gene Cernan because they can't do the same thing.
Now we're standing in front of something that's very, very important here. It's a moon rock, actually a piece of the moon. Tell us about it, Chris.
So we have a moon rock here. A couple of things. First of all, this was collected on Apollo 17 by Harrison Schmitt, so not by Gene Cernan, as we had hoped, but that's okay. So we have a moon rock, what NASA usually refers to as a lunar sample or astromaterials. And those things are pretty tightly controlled. Yes. So we have to have certain security and stuff in place. So when you look at the moon rock, the first response is several people have said they think it looks like a charcoal briquette. It's not, but it in a way is kind of related because it's the rock type is called basalt, and it's basically equivalent to lava. There was volcanic activity on the moon in the distant past, and this lava filled in craters and other low-lying areas. When you look at a photograph of the moon, you see the dark areas. That's where the basalt is, where the lava flowed. And so that's the rock that we have here. A lot of people look at it and they go, but it's so dark. And the thing is that the moon is 1,000 shades of gray. Everything from very light to very, very dark. And so all different types of rocks found there as well. But we're very pleased to have the moon rock. I wish we had it permanently, but we have it into April of 2023. So we wanted to make sure we had it for a good long time to give people an opportunity to come see it.
So people, you have until April of 2023 to come and see the real moon rock. And when I saw the sign over there that says, don't come any closer than this because an alarm will go off, it reminded me of these movies that you see where people have diamonds on display with light rays around them. And that's exactly what this looks like. It's really secure.
Yeah. So, well, the thing is, though, is we also wanted you to be able to get up close and personal, to actually be able to look at it. And we also have earth rocks as samples of what the lunar sample is equivalent to. So we have rocks that you can handle, that you can study under a magnifying glass, and we also occasionally bring out a microscope and you can actually look at the crystal structure of the rock and compare it to different types of rocks and the type of rock that we have as our lunar sample.
Outstanding. I'm pumped. And we're going to look at one more thing before we end our program today, and it's a photo, a very important photo, signed by lots of astronauts, right?
Yes, sir. So,
right after this.
Inspire curiosity. Inspire adventure. Inspire generations. Discover the Cernan Earth and Space Center on the campus of Triton College in River Grove.
Before we end the program, here's an interesting photo that Chris reminded me of that's on display at the Cernan Earth and Space Center. And why don't you explain to the folks what this photograph is?
So it's a beautiful photograph of the moon, but the thing that makes it really special is that it was autographed by all 12 moonwalkers and command module pilot Michael Collins from Apollo 11. So all 12 men who walked on the surface of the moon, and unfortunately now there are only 4 of those moonwalkers still living. So, but it's a really cool, it's just cool to think about the people who, signed this and their accomplishments.
And you've got a lot of other nice photographs down this hallway too.
Yeah.
There's so much here for you folks to see, so stay tuned for the credits at the end of the show. You'll have all the information on who you call, where Triton College is. I know most of you out there probably have some idea of where River Grove is, but Triton College, and we give Triton College a lot of credit for maintaining the Cernan Earth and Space Center.
Well, when we're very grateful, and the cool thing is, admission to the exhibits is free.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is come see us.
We like free things, right? And I want to thank you very much. You're very erudite, and I've never met anybody in my life that knows as much about the Apollo program and probably all the other moon programs.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I try to keep up with everything. It's a challenge, and with all the new exploration that's going on, Artemis and Orion and, Lunar Gateway, there's a lot of cool stuff on the horizon for us, and hopefully some new footprints on the moon.
Hopefully we can land another man on the moon before 50 more years are up, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that's all the time we've got at the Cernan Earth and Space Center at Triton College in River Grove, Illinois. I want to thank Chris McCall, the director of the center, one more time. Chris, you're amazing.
Thank you for having me.
And the credits at the end of the show have all the information you need to contact Chris and get your tickets. And before we leave, you do have this book, The Last Man on the Moon, right?
Yes, of course we have this
For
book.
sale.
Yes, Last Man on the Moon, both unsigned and signed copies, so autographed copies of the book. If you know someone who's a real collector, it's a treasure, and a lot of other cool stuff in a modest little gift shop.
Outstanding. And that's all I've got to say. Come out to the Cernan Earth and Space Center. You may even bump into me, and I know you'll bump into Chris at the Cernan Earth and Space Center, River Grove, Illinois, Triton College.